Hello everybody, this is Connor, Boats Don't Sink from Iron City Games, and, as I'm sure everyone's seen, the big news from the Bushiroad English Conference Winter 2021, which was last night. Attack on Titan Final Season is the English edition original for at least the first one of 2022. Which normally they tend to release in July, so I'm assuming it's going to come out around then. It gives us about 6 or 7 months to prepare, maybe 8 if it comes out in August. And given that it's been, by then it'll have been almost 5 years since Set 2 came out, almost 7 years since Set 1. The game's grown a lot since then. A lot of people that are playing right now probably don't own those cards. I know a number of them are getting harder and harder to find, but Attack on Titan's a huge series, and a lot of people probably want to get in, and it's very possible that this set supports the older ones. It's also very possible that it doesn't, and provides some new stuff instead. So, before I get into talking too much about that, small spoiler warning, I guess, if you aren't caught up in what the final season contains. If you care about that, maybe don't watch this next part, because I am going to be talking about what happens a little bit, very minor, in final season. So yeah, you've been warned. But final season focuses partially on a lot of characters that are not part of the Survey Corps or tied to that group at all. Really, they're opposing them, right? So it's very likely that we're going to see at least part, if not a majority of the set, probably not a majority, probably about half and half, focusing on these Marley characters rather than the Survey Corps. That obviously will probably be a deck on its own and not care about the old stuff, but since our old characters are still showing up, obviously Eren, Mikasa, Armin, Levi, all of them are still around. So we are going to be seeing probably some support for the old decks. Or just an entirely new core deck that maybe some of the old cards slot into. It's very hard to say with us being this far out, and with it having been nearly 5 years since the previous sets. So that being said, what cards should you look at maybe making sure you own before this set comes out if you're wanting to build that? Obviously, the place you should start is, the 2 climax combos that have won Worlds twice, right? My Fate to Bear Eren and To Seize Freedom Mikasa. Except probably not. I don't think either of these are particularly going to be great going forward. Mikasa is still a strong finisher, so it is possible she sticks around, but being on a +2 soul trigger hurts a lot. Same with Eren being on a non-plussing trigger. A lot of decks have just moved into being a lot more efficient because they have plussing climax triggers. Neither of these combos are particularly bad. In fact, they're both above average still, I'd say. But these climax triggers hold them back a lot, and I do think we'll be getting more than likely some pretty good, at least more than serviceable climax combos in the set coming out. And especially with the absurd prices that the 1.0 Eren has reached, I can't really recommend it as something worth picking up. They're like over $100 a piece. So like maybe the Mikasas if you want them. I think they're like 15 to 20 still. Otherwise, I'd stay away from stuff like this. I'd honestly stay away from almost all the climax combos in either of the sets. I do think those will get replaced pretty firmly. The place I'd rather start is attack phase movement. This was the original mechanic, like the flavor behind Attack on Titan. It was heavily prevalent in Set 1, and honestly even more so in Set 2. So I want to look at some of the cards that interact with this. If you know anything about the Attack on Titan set at all, or the meta decks, you've seen at least the mobility gear, and probably a couple of the other cards. These are just some of the examples from Set 1. Like I said, I probably wouldn't recommend picking up the Armin. He's just an example of the theme that they did try to push. But I want to look at some of the cards that have to do with this, that enable it, or are payoffs for it. First up, obviously, the mobility gear itself. It's a 1/0 event counter. Search your deck for a core character, reveal it, put it in hand, discard a card, shuffle, and then choose one of your core characters in battle and move it to an open position of your stage. If you main phase this, it's a -1, because you're discarding one and losing the event to get one character out of your deck, but it's costless, so it's a costless like hand fix at -1. If you use it defensively and get to save a character because you're moving your character in battle, it is a break even, which is a lot better. The card wasn't particularly powerful. It was okay, but once the Eren 1-0 combo got printed in set 2, obviously that pushed it over the top because that combo was a +2. So even if you minused off of your mobility gear, it didn't matter. It was just hand fixing. Card might still be relevant. It is a way to enable movement during the attack phase. Whether we have cards that will interact with it coming out, very hard to say. But it is a way to enable movement during the attack phase, which can help with some of the stuff we're going to look at. Also, while we're talking about mobility gear, this one doesn't move your characters, but it has the same card name, so I'm going to go ahead and talk about it now. It's a 1/1 event counter. Instead of moving, you choose a character in battle, return it to your hand, and then choose a character in your waiting room, return it to hand, and then discard one. So again, this is a minus if you main phase it, because you're losing a card in hand and the event to get one character out of waiting room instead of your deck. And if you attack phase it, it is a break even. More often than the other move gear, because this just straight returns to hand. Your character is always getting saved. There's no way that your opponent can play in like an attack order that ends with your character still losing, right? So that's why this one costs 1. This also, since you're returning to hand, allows you to loop on play effects, which we have some of, and it's possible we'll get more good ones. This Armin is one of the more notable ways that the deck currently has to sort of mill through its deck, like any form of deck control. That is one of the downsides of Attack on Titan right now, is it has horrendous deck control. This Armin is pretty much their only thing. So getting to loop on play effects like this might be a reason to consider the 1/1 mobility gear, which as of now doesn't see play as more than like a 1 of. Everyone's either playing 4 copies of the 1-0 version or 3-in-1 split. Next card we have is Calm and Collected Mikasa. This is from set 1. This is a spammable salvage brainstorm. And during the attack phase, when your character moves to another stage position, that character gets plus 1,000 power until end of turn. This is not once per turn, so if you have multiple things that move, they're all going to get plus 1,000. If they move multiple times, they're going to get plus 1,000 multiple times. This can lead to rather large boards, especially early game. Anyone that's been playing this game for an extended period of time will know that like runners are a fairly common turn 1 play as a plussing level 0. We've seen K in Kaguya. We've even seen the Kaguya level 0 bomb in Kaguya. We've seen, you know, Attack on Titan has the Armin 3500 runner that we'll look at. ReZero has the Amelia 3500 runner. Like there's plenty of just runners or chasers, right? But Seven Deadly Sins has the Guild Thunder chaser. Slime has the Millum chaser. These things all move, right? Imagine if your opponent, you know, plays the Millum turn 1 and they chase in front of you, and now instead of a 3500, it's a 4500. You just can't do anything against that. You're side attacking almost every time. But that's why we have this next card. Single Ray of Light Mikasa is basically the same card, except not. Instead of a spammable Salvage Brainstorm, it is a Rest Self plussing Salvage Brainstorm. And instead of giving plus 1,000 power, it gives plus 500 power, and the ability the character facing this card cannot side attack. Meaning, if we get a Chaser in this new set, like, that's kind of insane, I think. It basically makes you Goblin Slayer, but better. Even if we just get more runners, or if we just play the Mikasa runner still. Like, that's, you know, 3k, they can't side attack it. And also, Salvage Brainstorm, I think, is generally better than Search Brainstorm, especially nowadays. The Eren Brainstorm has always seen play because the power pump was fairly relevant, and being yellow, you could grab it off of the Armin 1-0. But we don't know if either of those things are going to stay relevant, and that might push the Mikasa into being a better Brainstorm. Obviously, there's also the chance that we just get another good Brainstorm in Final Season. But I think this card is, I would put it as one of the most important cards to keep on your mind as we're moving into Final Season. Next, we have Relief Mikasa. This is basically like the same idea. It pumps 1,000 during attack phase when your character moves, and it's a level assist. This one's at common for a reason. I don't think it's particularly good, but I wanted to at least mention it just in case. Moving into things that actually move, we have Paving a Way for the Future Mikasa. This is the set 1 mill runner. It doesn't do anything else. It's just a mill runner. It sees play in the deck right now because it's an additional plussing 0, and the deck wants those. Whether it continues to see play is just very up in the air. But it runs, and that enables these effects that we're looking at. So if this ends up being a theme, maybe this is a card that'll see some play. Just because you can, turn 1 it. If you turn 1 this in the Brainstorm, it's a 3k that can move in front of something they can't side, so they have to crash their guy. That's really good. If you don't open the Brainstorm, this is still a runner, so it's still a plussing 0, and it gives you that mill spike, which sometimes you want the mill, sometimes it conflicts if you're playing mobility gears and stuff. You have events that you can miss your mill on, so like that conflicts a bit. So it's pretty up in the air, but a pretty good card overall if this theme continues. Next we have To Seize Freedom Armin, which is the preferred runner in the current deck. It's 3,500 if you have 5 or more cards in hand, but it can only move to the middle position of your center stage, which does admittedly make it a lot worse with the can't side attack effect, because your opponent can either be directly in front of him, and then he's not moving in that case, right? So they can still side attack, or they can just be on the opposite lane, so he can't move in front of them, because he can only move to the middle. So he only really prevents, like, tri-fields in that case, where they have to be playing in the center to get all their characters. Otherwise, he doesn't work as well with the stuff we've looked at, but he does work better, I think, on his own, where, you're just playing this turn 1, and he is both a 3,500 and a center runner, so either your opponent basically has to be able to answer a 3,500 in 2 lanes to stop him, so he's a good plussing 0. There's a reason the deck already plays 4 of them. We have Born in Dauper Sasha. So instead of being a runner, this is a field swap, and it is an anti-change bomb. This is similar to the Yoshino 1/1 from Data Live, which is a very popular and powerful card. It's a little bit worse, A, because it's a 2/1 instead of a 1/1, and B, because it reverses instead of bottom decks, meaning your opponent still has the opportunity to encore their character. But the one upside that this does have, again, going back to the Mikasa Brainstorm, if you field swap this in front of your opponent's early play, they can no longer side attack it. One of the ways to get around Yoshino, at least temporarily, is to side attack over them. You're still probably dealing 2 damage, maybe even more. Whereas this, now they can't side attack, right? You can force your opponent to crash the Yoshino into you and maybe open up a board position. This, you're forcing your opponent to crash into your anti-change bomb, meaning you'll always win and get rid of their character. That is something pretty powerful to keep in mind. Next we have Resisting Fate Mikasa. This is one of the level 3s from set 1. It is an 11k healer from hand or by a change effect, and at the beginning of your opponent's attack phase you can pay 1 to field swap again. 11k healer is already fairly good, and being a field swap, again, enables all these power pumps, can't side effects, all this stuff that might just put your opponent's board in a lot harder of a position. It does have a changer. It's a 2/1. It's a pay-2 encore step change. We'll talk about it a little more later. Know that bringing this out at level 2 does cost you 3 stock if you're playing the 2/1 and then changing, and then it will cost you a 4th stock if you wish to field swap. But the 2/1 gets pretty big, so using 4 stock, you're probably winning a lane on offense and then also winning another lane on defense with the field swap. And that can be pretty valuable, so it's often worth the 4 stock, and you're also getting a heal and a 2-soul beater that's 11k out of it. I do think this card is pretty good overall. The next big point is, what if Attack on Titan gets standby? This is a big question in a lot of people's minds. Set 1 obviously came out a few years before standby existed. Set 2 came out very shortly after standby was introduced, at a point in time when Bushiroad was still very hesitant to print standby in A, every set, and B, alongside things that could easily abuse it, and boy oh boy can Attack on Titan abuse it. So it makes sense that Attack on Titan set 2 didn't get one, for similar reasons that we saw, like Fate never got one, Madoka never got one. But just in case, since we are very likely getting a non-core trait deck. It is at least possible that they print like a standby into that deck, and if you want to play it in core, you have to play it like without a combo. So I at least want to prepare for that situation and show a couple of cards that are going to be very useful if we do get a standby. Attack on Titan doesn't have the typical like 1/1 and 2/2 just encore big bodies because they never really needed them. They have some with Clock Encore at 1/1, and they don't really have any good 2/2s. Obviously, if we get standby, they're just going to print those in the new set, so you don't have to worry about that. But the cards that I'm going to show you, I think, are a lot more problematic than 1/1s and 2/2s. First up is the Changer to the Field Swap. As I said, it's an Encore step change, and the only condition for Encore step changes is being rested at the Encore step, which is, guess what, after you would have standbyed it into play at rest. So you can just play a standby from hand at level 1, get your 2/1, and then change into the 3/2, and then field swap it into the front row for a total of 3 stop. Or if you trigger the standby in your attack phase, you can standby the Mikasa 2/1 to your front row, and then just pay 2 to change, and you don't have to field swap it. Or you can if you need to. So obviously it's very powerful. 11k healer at level 1 that can field swap is probably one of the strongest things that any standby deck would be able to do. And it doesn't stop there. Notably though, I would recommend picking up this Mikasa anyway, even if you don't believe we're going to get standby. Just because, as I said, it attacks for big. It goes up to 9k on its own, but Attack on Titan notably has a lot of power pump. A lot of offensive power pump. This card can very easily break, 11k or 12k. So it can win a lane and then change into the Mikasa. Or the 3/2 Mikasa. And I think that package is good enough, even if we don't get standby. The nice card to look at, obviously every standby deck needs its 2k assist, and this is probably the most pushed 2k assist that's ever been printed. A, it can't be chosen by your opponent's effects. Once it's in play, they can't return it to your hand, they can't, like, My Little Shido it, nothing. Its assist, all of your core characters get plus 2000 power and also cannot be chosen by your opponent's effects, meaning they can't return your other early plays or standby targets or whatever to your hand. And on play from hand, you look at top X, put 1 in hand, put the rest in waiting room. X is the number of core characters you have. Card is really just insane. Hexproof is very relevant, especially if you're trying to win board. Bounce effects and like level down effects have been getting more and more common, and this has the ability to stop them, which is super good. This is, again, a card you should pick up even if you don't think they're going to get standby, and if they do get standby, it's just insane. Even more insane because this 2/1 changes into it. Also an Encore step change, only requiring that it's rested, meaning standby immediately turns on its condition. It changes from hand, since this was printed in set 2 after the Armin came out in set 1, meaning you do have to do a little more sculpting to get there, but it also means that it enables the on-play from hand check top X effect. If you are just playing the Armin in a regular deck, you rest him, give a character 2500 power, and cannot be chosen by your opponent's effects. Meaning you can use this to pump early plays or 2/1s to kill your opponent's early plays, or like 2/2s or whatever. And then since you've rested it main phase, it enables the change at your encore step. Very powerful card, very good package. Again, something you should be playing, or something you should at least have on hand, regardless of whether we get standby. This card has seen a little bit of play without standby, like in the current decks. I think it's mostly only good if we do get standby. It's when it's frontal attacks, you can pay 1, send it to waiting room to play the 3/2 Eren Titan, single red white Eren Titan from your hand to the stage as the defending character. If your opponent chooses not to frontal attack it and your Eren lives until your turn, you can resonate with that same Eren Titan from your hand to get +1 soul, meaning you get to attack a little better. And hopefully live to force them to frontal attack again. This is another thing where if you have field swaps and the Mikasa Brainstorm, you can force them to not be able to side attack, meaning they have to frontal attack this and enable your sort of trap change effect. The 3/2 that it changes into is the effect we're seeing more of nowadays. On play until end of next turn, gets 4500, and all players cannot play backup from a hand in its battle, meaning you're trap changing into a 14/5 plus whatever assists you have. This very well might be like a 16/5 hexproof with the Armin assist behind it. On play from hand, you can marker the 3/2 Eren that you can see below from your waiting room, and then when the Eren Titan gets reversed, you can pay 1, sack him to play the 3/2 regular Eren from the marker. And that enables a heal, and he's like a pseudo restand climax combo, but he's on a return trigger, so I don't think he's particularly great, and I wouldn't really worry about including him in this. You can pick him up if you want as sort of a package all around him with some Titan zeros and stuff. Not something I would personally consider, but you do you. We have this card sees no play and will only be decent, I think, if we get standby. But until the Dying Breath, Armin, he is an 11k, and on attack you can discard a card to give a character a soul, set some damage control, and then it has the effect during your opponent's turn. If damage you receive is not cancelled, if he's at your center stage, you can look at top card and put it on top or into waiting room. This is an effect we see in standby decks sometimes, just to provide a little bit of extra defensive power. Goblin Slayer has the Witch Assist, and Sword Art Online has the UE 3/2 stock swap with this effect. It's fairly decent. It's not game-breaking, but it's a pretty decent thing to have around as a standby target. Next, funnily enough, we have the Trial Deck level 3 Eren from set 1. This card's actually kind of just a really good standby target. He's an 11k. Character facing him gets -1 soul, which is, again, it's damage reduction. You're trying to stay at level 2 and wall your opponent out. And during his battle, your opponent can't play backup from hand. So he's an 11k, plus whatever assists you have. He might be a 12, 5, 13, even bigger. And your opponent can't back up, meaning you're going to win the lane with them, which means you get to minus their soul on your next turn. And at level 2, like people say minus soul sometimes is a downside because your opponent, it gives your opponent better swings, right? If they're climax comboing at 3, now they're swinging for 2 instead of 3, or 3 instead of 4, which gives them better chances to stick their finisher damage against you. But at level 2, it's actually pretty good because the damage reduction helps a lot, gives you more chances to keep playing early play healers and stay at 2. So this might just be something good if they get standby. Who knows? And lastly, this one's more funny than anything. To seize freedom, Erwin is a 1/1/7/5 if you have a full board, so that's on par with normal 1/1s anyway. And then at the end of your turn, if he's in your center stage, you can pay 1, discard a core character, deal 1 to your opponent, which is, it's extra damage. You can obviously get this guy out as early as level 0 if they have standby, level 1 otherwise, and just start chipping away at your opponent throughout the game. But the cool interaction is, like, if you do your finisher turn and trigger a standby in the middle of the turn, you can just put this guy over one of your things that's already attacked. And then end of turn, you can pay 1, ditch 1, deal 1. So like maybe that's the extra damage that wins you the game. Who knows? I don't know if this would actually be good or not, but it's funny enough that I wanted to mention it in the context of standby. Moving on from standby, that's obviously a highly theoretical situation. We don't know if we're gonna get standby. A lot of people argue pretty hard against it because of decks like Fate and Madoka never getting it. But who knows? The last 4 English originals have all had at least 1 standby, so maybe. We're praying. But here's everything else you might want, just random utility and strong cards that might fit into the shell with the new deck. First up, this is the only climax combo I'm going to mention really in this whole thing that you might want to look at picking up. And I'm still not super sold on how strong it might be, so if the price turns you away, don't feel like you need to get this. It's 5,500, and when its battle opponent becomes reversed, you get to stock the top card of your deck and grab a mobility gear from your waiting room. So it's like a +1.5, kind of, and it's on a comeback trigger, which is really the reason I care about it. Eren obviously is on a return trigger, which is less good, though some people would argue return trigger is still pretty good in a standby meta. But I think having a plussing trigger here is pretty good. Mobility gear may or may not stay relevant. We may or may not get a new mobility gear event. And, getting the extra stock alongside the hand makes this a little more efficient than just a regular +1 combo, I think. So, maybe this card's worth it to stick around. Single Ray of Light Armin, as I said earlier, is one of the biggest forms of deck control the deck currently has, and if yellow stays a predominant color in the deck, I think this card 100% stays. It's a 105k on play, reveal up to 3. If you reveal 1 or more, you get to choose a yellow character or a mobility gear, put it in hand, put the rest in waiting room, and then discard 1. So it's a break even, but it gives you hand fix and mill. You see this in decks like Memory Snow, and you see like on reverse versions of it in a few decks as well, or on death versions. Sword Art has always had, when they hit Waiting Room, they get to do this. So it's a fairly strong effect. Some people aren't huge fans of it, but on play, I think a lot of people will agree, on play is very strong since it gives you the options during your own main phase. And if the 1/1 mobility gear becomes relevant, you know, you get to loop this. If other ways to return to hand become relevant, looping this is very powerful. Even if we just get more efficient, selective climax combos that can loop this, that'd be very powerful. If for some reason green becomes the color that we're playing instead of yellow or red, this Levi does the same thing, except minus the mobility gear part, and it's for green characters. So same concepts apply with this card. 104th Cadet Core Class Christa. This is just on play, pay 1, clock 1, salvage a level 1 or lower. You've probably heard the term, I'm playing my Christa, or like, this is a Christa, thrown around a lot. This is what it's referring to. This is one of the least likely cards probably to be relevant on here. I think it'll probably get just outclassed in the set, either by an on-play like search or some other effect. Every English original pretty much up to this point has gotten some kind of pay 1, clock 1 plus that is better than this. So I would expect Final Season to also get something better than this, but if it doesn't, know that this card exists. Moving to some early plays, we have Resisting Fate Eren. This is an early play condition we don't see very often nowadays. It's if your opponent has a level 3 or higher, he gets -1 level in hand. Almost every deck in existence is playing some form of level 3 at level 2, which means that this Eren is almost always going to be live as long as you don't hit level 2 first. He's an 11/5, which is absolutely enormous for early plays. And during the turn he's placed on stage, if his damage is cancelled, you get to deal 1. So you can either just push consistent damage at the mid-game, or use him as both an early play and an off-climax finisher in the case that you don't, draw enough copies of your climax finisher or don't get your climax, or if the one that we get in the next set is just very resource-intensive, this can be your second and third lanes. So he fills multiple roles, so I do like this card quite a bit. We also have Silent Fury Levi. This is an early play that doesn't see any play right now because it's green, but if green gets relevant for some reason, 2 or less climax early play, he's a 10/5 and he heals. Very simple card, but it is something that, a lot of decks boast that they can do a 2 or less climax early play into a 4 or more character early play on the same board state. You see that some in Slime, for example, with Shion and Shuna. And this could enable that, potentially. So maybe something to keep an eye on. Last early play I have here is To Seize Freedom Sasha. This card saw some play as a big tech option against decks like Fate and Konosuba in the end of 2019, especially at Worlds. Same early play condition if your opponent has a level 3 or higher character, which almost all decks do. And on play, put the top card of your deck into your waiting room. Choose up to one of your opponent's level X or lower and put it into their waiting room. X is the level of the card that you mill off the top of your deck. So you're basically always going to be able to hit a back row if they have like a brainstorm or something. You just early play this down, pop their brainstorm. And if you get to mill a level 2 or 3 off the top, you might get rid of their early play or one of their standby targets or something. So pretty favorable trade most of the time, I think, with this Sasha. The big things that it was hitting were like the Union Resonate in Konosuba or the Shiro Clock Encore, for example, in Fate. Nowadays, you'd be hitting some other stuff because those decks... I mean, Shiro is probably seeing a good bit of play still. Konosuba, not so much. But basically every deck's playing Brainstorms or some kind of back row you can hit. Last effect is that it gets +1 soul when it attacks pretty much always, so it's a 3 soul beater, which can also be good. Can sometimes be bad, but can be good probably more often than not. So yeah, this is, another card. Maybe it's going to see plays like a tech 1 to 2 of. As far as back row cards go, we have Recurring Tragedy Eren. This card does currently see play because power is relevant on offense. We don't know if power will remain relevant on offense or not, but if it does, this card gives you a lot of it. It's global 1k to your board, during your turn, and then it can rest to give another 500. So, big power. Violent Ripple's Levi. If green just needs a very small splash, this has historically been one of the cards to do it with. It's a global 500 power, and on play, you give one of your opponent's front row characters minus 1,000. People always seem to think that these effects don't matter a whole lot, but I always think there's like a lot of relevant cards that you could at least get to answer with this. And even if they don't have cards that have on reverse effects, you know, even just popping whatever they do have is usually pretty good. And this lets you answer a lot of things in pretty optimal ways, and the number of things this card can answer just grow with every set, so it might remain one of the better green color fix options, honestly. We also have Relief Eren. This is a card that I have pretty much never seen play, though I'm sure someone's played it in the 8 return deck. It's a 500 assist, which is less than optimal, but 500 assist. And when your character's trigger check reveals a yellow climax, you can discard a card to salvage a character. This is reminiscent of, say, Spriggan Kirito or the Mob together with Ritsu, where those are both when you trigger a gate climax, you can discard one to salvage. This is just any yellow climax. Obviously, yellow climaxes in AOT before now were pretty not great. Just because they were return and shot triggers and 2 soul triggers. None of them plussed, so like, you never really wanted to play 8 of them unless you were playing the 8 return deck, and even that has sort of fallen off as a deck. Whereas, moving forward, we are, I would say, almost 100% going to get at least 1 choice trigger, if not 2. Probably 2. Maybe 3, who knows. We're going to have choice triggers, and this does really cool things with choice triggers, where if you trigger a choice, now you can choose to get a stock and hand fix for free, or you can choose to, like, grab a character without a soul trigger, right? So you can get a character with a soul trigger and then just pitch it to get a different character. Or if you want the character with the soul trigger, you can add it to hand and then hand fix something else out. So it gives you a lot of control over your hand. 3 of the last 4 English originals have gotten free fresh backups. If Attack on Titan gets one, this allows you to take stock off of your choice trigger and still hand fix into your free fresh counter, assuming they get one. So this enables a lot of things that I really like. Even if you just want to pay out, like say you trigger the climax on your last attack and just want to pay it out, you can take the stock and then hand fix into a costed backup, right? So I think this card, if choice triggers are good moving forward, this card is sweet. It's also worth noting that the salvage is not trade locked, so maybe this even fits into a Marley deck if that's where the choice triggers are. We don't know, but that's possible. So this is another card that I would probably keep my eyes on if yellow stays big. And then some backups are the last thing I want to talk about. Confirming the unknown Hange. This is just a Lefa backup. When you play the backup, reveal top card. If it's core, put it in your hand, discard one. These hand fix you, they dig you toward cancels. Unfortunately, with this one being as old as it is only 1,500 power, as opposed to the more recent post-choice trigger ones that are 2,000 power, but lower printed. So this might just get outclassed, but, you know, it can't hurt to buy 1 or 2 of these. I can't imagine they're more than 25 or 50 cents. We also have this. This is an anti-change counter. Again, I think they'll almost certainly get some kind of new anti-change counter, but it can't hurt to have these around. It's a discard 2 anti-change. Most of the English originals have been getting pay to sack a character, so I could see us getting one of those instead. And this deck has never really wanted to discard the hand, but who knows, maybe in the future it has enough hand to be able to afford using this, or maybe red is just going to be better than whatever the new one they get is. Who knows? Again, it can't hurt to have these, I don't think. And last, this is Indomitable Will Eren. This was a monthly shop promo from, I believe, the end of 2017, maybe like January 2018. It's just a memory kickback up, 3,000 power. These also see play every now and then, because they do deny Encores. They're good against decks like Slime, which have Encore on their early plays. And they can also, they're good against decks like Adventure Time, if you can beat over, because you turn off part of their finisher effect. And also slime, 8 choice slime, you get to turn off their finisher effect. So memory cake backups do see play in a few decks as like tech 1 of backups. So I think that this is also, you know, maybe something worth having. But yeah, I believe that is all the cards I have to talk about. The things that I would look at maybe picking up. I'm sure there are some that I missed. I'm sure there are some cards that I maybe think are a lot more relevant than they're going to be. Obviously, with this being a set, you know, 5 years more developed than the last set we have to support Attack on Titan, it's possible we're just playing 50 new cards, you know, moving forward and not worrying about the old stuff at all. But for those of you that are wanting to be super prepared, I think this list will help you out a bit. If there's anything you think I missed, let me know in the comments. Like and subscribe, as always. You can find me at Boats Don't Sink on Twitter. You can find the store at Iron City Games 1 on Twitter, Iron City Games on Facebook. You can find us at ironcitygames.tcgplayerpro.com if you're looking for any singles or playsets. You can use the discount code ICGConnor to get a discount on those playsets even. And moving forward into 2022, starting with Rent a Girlfriend, we will be selling our playsets at a much lower price, so keep an eye out for that. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.